Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. William Carson is the Director of Market Engagement at Ascensos. Now, he's based in London, but if you remember when CX Files talked to John Devlin, the co-founder of the company, then you'll know that the company itself is based in Scotland. In addition to his day job, William has also been on the council of the Global Sourcing Association for the past 4 years. He's a regular contributor to various CX-focused journals, and during the initial lockdown in 2020, he helped to form what is now possibly LinkedIn's first ever virtual rock band, called Project Lockdown. I'm sure they're available for weddings and parties anywhere you can get a Zoom connection. Now, William is someone I've known for many years now, and I know that his role at Ascensos brings him constantly into the world of how retail companies are designing modern CX today. So given the constant negative news about retail in the UK, US and Europe recently, I called him to ask how CX can address some of the post-pandemic retail challenges. William, thanks for being on the podcast. Now, we're going to focus on retail, and I know that Ascensos works with loads of retail clients. So I'm sure you have a lot of good ideas about this space. Now, in the UK, there's been a lot of change recently in the past few months. BooHoo bought Debenhams, Asos bought Arcadia. We're seeing like 15-year-old companies buying companies that have almost got a 2-century heritage. I mean, is there a place in the high street for these traditional clothing stores today?
I think yes, definitely, and I think I only have to reflect, Mark, on my short trip to Oxford Circus on December 5th last year when lockdown was lifted slightly, and even Topshop was absolutely buzzing on Oxford Street. But what I recognize is, and what you see really working better, is those that really thrive will be the ones that make that Phygital link between online and offline. And maybe perhaps the old department store, the problem with it was the model became so across every high street, across every town, across every city, even across every nation around the world through the 20th century, that it became accepted as the only model. And I think there's still possible opportunities for the department stores, but they'll never be called department stores again, I don't think. I think it's just now synonymous with failure, synonymous with the steam engine, albeit those things were fantastic in their time and pushed boundaries. But today, no, I think there's a place for stores and a place for big stores, but they'll have to be part of a greater experiential aspect to attract and retain customers.
Yeah. So, I mean, something I see in Brazil is these artistic collectives where you get a big space and loads of concessions, and that's effectively a department store, but just with a new name.
Absolutely, and I think just listening to I think it was the CEO from Flair Speakers today, he was talking about the fact that while we see the stores slightly down at heel at the moment, he expects that they will actually then perpetuate what needs to happen online too. So he's looking for a solution, for example, like a hub market almost online, where you can actually say, you know what, I want to buy audio and audio speakers for health. I want to go to a place where it's just those. I don't want to do Amazon. I want to go to a place where it's a bit of a hub for those types of stores. So, I don't think the link will ever be broken, but I think the big department store that we grew up with as children, I think, has had its day. Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned there that Topshop was buzzing when you went past, and obviously we've seen the downfall of Arcadia, the group that owned Topshop. And I can remember reading quotes, it might have been Philip Green or someone else on the management team, but only 10 years ago saying that shopping for clothes will never move online. So, I mean, do we need to revise all of our assumptions and expectations about online and physical stores? Because even look at the lockdown, grocery shopping, food shopping, everybody felt that food shopping would be the last bastion of the experiential shopping. And yet people, when forced to move online, they kind of enjoyed it. So are we going to see permanent changes there?
I think so. Certainly all the brands, we support over 20 retail brands, including some of the essential services in grocery. as well as some of the high fashion brands across Europe. And there's no doubt that the behaviors that have been established, and certainly were getting established anyway, have now mushroomed to the extent that there's very little, I think, that could be done to say that the two things can't now coexist, or in some way that there has to be a competitive nature to both of them. I think what's happened is stores that simply didn't have an online presence, like Primark, for example, will have to really revisit that strategic thinking, which is perhaps linked to some of that thinking that Arcadia had. But clearly, while online sales will continue, it has also to be said that even up as recently as February, March last year, before the pandemic lockdowns began, there's still a huge amount of in-store sales, and that's not going to go away. I think it was something like 90% of sales were still in-store, even though the numbers were massive for online too. Because I think sometimes online sales get reported across absolutely everything from widgets to fashion. So I think from that point of view, Mark, the Arcadia thinking that it could only ever be in store was wrong, absolutely. I mean, you only have to go back as far as I do, my time at Phygital Consulting in the 90s when we were brought in to help BooHoo.com actually start. And they were already trying to do 3D visualization of their products online way before the broadband could catch up with them. So I think it was always recognized, but the real free thinkers, that online is an experience in itself.
Yeah, and the story of Boo.com is a great book, actually, as well. I mean, how to burn through hundreds of millions of dollars when you're trying to do 3D visualizations of clothes, even though people are on dial-up modems,
Yeah, it was just nuts. But you can't blame them for thinking the way now we all accept things.
Yeah, they were ahead of their time. They just didn't have the bandwidth, the speeds, to do that kind of shopping.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the solutions that a lot of people have talked about for big stores, especially, is making it experiential. But if you look at the reality today, I mean, I don't think the cinema in Selfridges has reopened, or if it has, they must have some very strict controls on it. And if you look at the American press, all the big malls over there have put in roller coasters and all sorts of stuff. And, none of that real estate can be used at the moment. So, how do you build this experiential stuff, but still pay the rent and pay your taxes?
I think it's really getting the customer inside is the first piece of the puzzle. How do we get them to come to the store? For example, in my view, making the store experiences anew, really stores have been trying to push these boundaries as long as shopping has existed, if you like. But I think if we take away what happened with the department stores, which really created this almost a high street inside a building effect in the 20th century, what people are now looking for is as linked to their streaming activity. And I heard one of the people on today from Coty in the US talking about, they've had huge success for their brand, their beauty products through streaming. And I think that's a reality. There's going to be a range of these new ways of thinking about the experience of the customer while they still have their wallet in their pocket, as it were. And I think it can be as simple as I think you remember, Mark, in central London, the Rafa bike store. Just throw up a Bijou coffee bar. You get all these people there, and undoubtedly people browse and buy a 40 quid cycling top simply because they're in the store. It can be as complex, of course, as, JD Sports have brought in. I saw their Oxford Street has this wonderful products with radio frequency stickers on the bottom of them. You put them on this particular table, which then throws up on the screen all this information about it, the backstory, videos, the whole 9 yards. So, it's just a shoe and you still need to try it on, but immediately you're hooked, you're engaged. And if you've come to the store with intent, then that intent is then further amplified and complemented by this experience. Nespresso store in Regent Street, exactly the same. If you don't come out of there with a commitment to buy a machine, it'll be because really you haven't been paying attention to the environment you're in. So I think really the experiential part, the only limits really that brands have are the kind of creativity they can muster inside their business or get externally. And then it's the knowledge of their customers and what they want. which is the data. And the data, again, speaking with retailers this week, it's not about the demographic and their propensity. It's about understanding their customer intent, where they're at, what their intent when they convey it is, and where they're in their purchasing journey at the point that they convey it. That all has to be taken into the stores and also related to what's happening online as well. These are all things like iBeacons, QR codes, all these things, the use of video, in video format screens as virtual assistants in stores. It's all possible. I think the worst thing about the closing down of the high street during 2020 is that we're in danger of getting some of these great ideas. All that's happened is now that we're going to shift to understanding the role that online has in that as a Phygital link up, and then amplify that for the future of the high street going into 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I think that if I was in a store trying to buy a running shoe, then I could see, with augmented reality, I could see Usain Bolt wearing the same shoes. I don't know if that would be a good thing or a bad thing, for my own performance.
Yeah, as long as he was sitting down, you'd be all right with it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we've seen over time is like brand loyalty passing from generation to generation. With these kind of big established stores. I mean, things like Marks and Spencer's would be a classic. Your mum and dad bought you shirts from M&S, and you kind of carry on doing that when you become an adult. But if you look at a lot of these newer fashion brands, it seems they've actually got fans rather than customers. I mean, they've managed to build this fan base and extremely loyal in a few years. I mean, how have they done that so quickly?
I think, again, it's about customer data. And again, retailers all this week at different events have been talking about you have to listen to your customers. You have to recognize that most of the questions that your CEO, the next big strategic question that your CEO will have, the answer actually exists in your customer data. Chatting, Pret with the launch of their barista subscription model, 20 quid a month, and you get, all these coffees, anything that the baristas make on your membership. These are all from listening to customers, and really, again, it comes to this constantly referred back to across all the brands that I've had some engagement with over the last 6 months, but also particularly through events this week. It's about intent. You need to know the intent. You can't just look at it like you did 20 years ago with Institute of Direct Marketing, would look at this element, that segmentation. You have to start to becoming what I have called for a long time, a customer anthropologist. You've got to get the tools and technology to actually overlay what are they actually doing? How do we recognize intent? And when they convey intent, how do we act on it? How do we respond on it? And again, one of the brands was talking about how they've made sure and actually feel that, regrettable as the circumstances of the pandemic have been, it's created for them an opportunity to get all their teams from marketing, from sales, from stores, from brand design, all together in the one place on Teams virtually, and makes a demand that they communicate with each other all the time. And the benefit of that is the online e-commerce team can see where things are working or where creative isn't working, and can immediately get on Teams with the marketing department guys to say, you need to slightly change this or amplify that, or basically take something out. And that, I think, is going to be the way of the future, Mark.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that point about the different teams, the silos working together more easily today, because I wanted to ask about logistics, because clearly if you're a brand like Shein, you live or die by whether those products are there on time, whether it's easy to do returns. Are these fashion brands, are they excelling at logistics themselves, or are they just finding great logistics partners?
I think it's probably a mix. I think some of them are looking at their outsourcing of their fulfillment as a strategic discussion from the get-go, so they don't come foul of having to scale and then scale up and then reduce down their headcount from an ethical point of view, is what I'm hearing. But also I think others want to create that as a facilitation that they then themselves might become a wider marketplace with that kind of facilitation for other brands. But I think there's other great examples, like there's a fulfillment company called BooHoo, and they're based in Bath. But what they've done is they've taken a really long look at the issue, particularly for the SME and smaller niche brands, really can't access that kind of scale that they need now that online's doing so well. And I think they took a brilliant approach, because what they did was they went out and they did the research first and foremost. And they've now experienced something like a tenfold growth over the last year. But it's the research that's told them that what customers really want is not particularly that Amazon approach of you can have it in 2 hours. What actually they want is control of when they can have it. They might not actually want it for 3 days. And it's recognizing again, what are we using in terms of the data from the customer to allow us to really come forward with an e-commerce model first and foremost that happens to be focused on the fulfillment of the product. And I think that is clearly a thinking that is kind of going against the grain of the traditional fulfillment house, which is the packages come in, they get delivered, they get out as fast as possible. It's not about that. It's about how much control can we give to the customer at that particular point in the customer journey, and how much sight of that journey can they give to the customer through whether it's an app, through it online, whatever it might be, so they can consistently and constantly have that sense of control over the outcomes that they're actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm personally having a nightmare with DHL right now over packages, and I think that if you could just, it's not the speed, like you said, it's just like, I know that I might be away for the next couple of days, so please deliver it in 3 days from now. And it just seems so hard still to arrange this kind of thing.
Exactly. And I know from our work, supporting brands and partnering with both DIY, essential services, but also with the fashion brands, the questions we get most asked by customers, well, not all the time, but obviously it's part of the pain of the transactional nature of the customer engagement is, where's my order? And very quickly, where's my refund? And that's what you're trying to avoid.
Yeah. And in fact, that pain of the actual fulfillment will often be enough to drive the customer to another brand. I mean, if you can't do that without paying, I mean, we mentioned briefly Shein there as well when in the last question. I mean, I'm seeing them all over the world right now. I mean, I'm seeing that they're creating such a social buzz. I'm constantly getting interrupted online by adverts for them, and I've never bought anything from them. I mean, are they just focusing their attention on social media to create this buzz? And do you think that that's what these brands need today to stimulate new customers and even to create loyalty as well?
Absolutely. I think any brand that these days is not looking at channels like TikTok or isn't looking at Instagram or the social media channels as the new yellow pages, if you like. I mean, there may be someone even listening to the podcast that will say, what in heaven's name is the yellow pages? But that type of approach where you could find everything that you needed whenever you needed at hand is now in your mobile. And social is the most interactive channel of all. We probably think it's WhatsApp, we probably think it's something else, but they're kind of, in my view, some passive channels from the brand's point of view, great communication channels. But the social is a push channel. And of course, you're going to buy. I know myself, I've bought stuff which I've regretted because it was pushed to me in an attractive and engaging manner. And then it gets pushed enough times, like you're saying about Shein, that you actually say, you know what, I'm going to check this out. I'm actually going to get involved, participate. And then, by the way, you find that somebody you're speaking to on another social channel says, oh, yeah, I use Shein. I love what they do. And that, I think, is the heart of, linking up with TikTok and all the other social channels and engaging channels is how you create fans and tribes today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess, to summarize everything, what I really wanted to sort of find out from all of this discussion is, how do we measure the value of the customer experience in all of this? It's easy for us to sort of say, well, department stores in their current format are finished, but we know that even brands like Amazon have been investing in physical real estate. So where does the CX fit into this kind of omni-channel blend of modern retail?
So there's a couple of things there, Mark. I think firstly, we've spent a long time in our industry and in retail saying we must understand the customer experience and we must drive the customer experience. What we fail to sometimes remind ourselves is the experience is unique to the customer. We're either driving a good one or a bad one, but the experience is unique to the customer. And really what I think is really great experience for the customer is to just achieve a desired outcome with little or no need to contact the brand at all. And if they do require to contact the brand, it's as little effort as possible when they do to get the experience or get the outcome they want. If they start to think, am I having a good experience or not, they're probably something's failed somewhere. So like a lot of the fintech platform providers, they consider that, contact initiated by a customer is an indicator of failure somewhere in the ecosystem. And of course, it's different for higher value transactions where someone's perhaps buying a kitchen or whatever. You want as much contact as possible, and so do they. But really, I think then you want the right people, right tool set, skill set, mindset to help the customer on that particular journey. But I'll just finish with a great example that I came across today, which I thought really ties all of this together about the Phygital and linking online, offline, and not having them up against each other. And it's really the Heels example. So what they did during the pandemic is they launched live chat on their website. But what they did was they linked the live chat to people in the store, right? So those people in the store would then more easily interact and engage with the customer because they're standing there looking at some of the stuff that perhaps the customers are already looking at online. And then what they found was, going back through their reporting, was those in-store chats would very quickly flip to telephone engagement. And what they've seen is a 10 times conversion rate of people that came through that route online, live chat talking to someone in the store, then on the telephone. And not only that, importantly, it was a 50 to 100% increase in the order value that they saw in this particular aspect of the experience for the customer. So that is obviously a great experience for the brand as well, because they're seeing that increase simply by linking live chat to the right type of engagement inside the brand that allows the customer in a real way to move forward with their purpose.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that IKEA also reflects that. I read that about 9 in 10 IKEA customers, even if they're in store making a purchase, they actually started the journey by searching for the product online. So, it's how you blend what information you put online and how you sort of guide them towards the purchase.
Yeah, and again, it's what is their intent at the point where they're conveying that intent. Have you got the technology to interrogate the intent? And then have you got the technology to respond to the intent with the right handoff to the right mechanisms that continue the journey for the customer without them really feeling they're on that journey at all?
Thanks for downloading the CX Files podcast. If you have a moment, please give us a star rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, because this really helps other people to find the podcast. If you have any suggestions for future guests, or ideas, people or topics, then please just find myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan on LinkedIn and send a suggestion.